Hi, I'm Ross Tayler. Welcome to Sacred Sundays, a space to slow down, tune in, and return to what's sacred within and around you. Some weeks you'll hear a sound-based offering to open the space. Other times we'll simply begin in conversation. However it unfolds, this is an invitation into presence, connection, and the beauty of the unseen. So pour a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin. Today I'm happy to have a conversation with Reverend Thomas DeSchutter. He invites you to live your best life as the loving presence of your own spiritual self. Drawing on diverse wisdom teachings and prayerful practices, he affirms that each of us is whole, complete, and infinitely capable of growth. His live sessions on Insight Timer have blossomed into a soul-filled community of truth seekers, where safety, openness, and authentic connection allow people to experience the best version of themselves. Ordained in 2023, with a Master of Divinity from Unity Worldwide Ministries, Reverend Thomas serves as Senior Minister of Unity Vancouver Island. He is also an award-winning drummer, devoted family man, and lifelong creator living on the west coast of Canada. He often reminds us that everything we want for ourselves and our lives comes from within. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Ross, for having me. I appreciate it.
And I believe you're going to begin by leading us with an opening prayer.
Yeah, I thought it would be appropriate that I start off with the foundational building of unity, which was based on healing and affirmative prayer. Shall I just take it from here?
Go for it.
Okay. So yeah, I'll invite everybody to just join me now. And if you can, if you're comfortable, please close your eyes. And if not, just find a place in front of you where you can soften your gaze and sit peacefully and just allow yourself to be breathed. Your body knows what to do. It'll take its breath, and just allow that to naturally unfold. And maybe just affirm in your own mind these words. You can just say them to yourself. I am the living expression of divine order and abundance. And so I pause and breathe deeply right here, right now. I remember who I am. I am the light of God expressing. I am the breath of spirit moving through time and space as love, as wholeness, and as radiant possibility. There is one presence and one power active in the universe and in my life. God the good, omnipotence. This presence is not separate from me. It's the very essence of my being. I affirm that divine order is the invisible architecture of my life. Every step I take is guided by infinite wisdom. Even when I cannot see the outcome, I trust the rhythm, the unfolding, the sacred choreography that moves in, around, and through all things and all of my being. What seems like delay is often divine preparation. What appears as chaos is, in truth, the reorganization of life. And so, I now release all need to control, manipulate, or figure it out. I surrender to the higher intelligence of life itself. I am not here to hustle for worthiness or chase prosperity. I am prosperity. I am the open channel through which abundance flows. My life is rich in purpose, overflowing in love, and steeped in meaning. And I invite you to affirm these words to yourself. I bless the past. I bless this moment. And I call forth the highest vision for my life, one rooted in service, spirit, and truth. I declare it done. I allow it to be. And so it is. And just take a nice deep breath in. Hold it at the top and let it go nice and slow. And allow yourself to return to your breath and enjoy this conversation.
Oh, that was great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What a great way to start out our conversation. So there was a line in there that spoke to me, and just wanted to kind of bring that up as our first talking point. You said chaos is the reorganization of love.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say about that statement?
Yeah, that came up because recently I've been playing with the idea of quantum physics and entropy, which is the steady decline of things into chaos. And this idea that the future is not written, although there are almost certain probable outcomes. In other words, I like to think of life as pure perfection, and not perfect in the way of did it go the way I wanted it to, but perfect in the way of the universe can only unfold perfectly. There's no mistakes. Everything that's in the soup is in the soup, and so you can only get what's in the soup. And so what the future represents to me is although there is that soup that's already at play, we have this great opportunity to also influence the future through our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions. And so through the act of bringing love into a constant state of presence, and in unity, love is one of our 12 powers. It resides in our heart space, and the meaning of that is more of harmonization. And so when we bring love into things, it begins to reorganize the world around us. And so what might have been turning into entropy and a slow, steady decline, by bringing love, it reorganizes that chaos into a life that we can then sort of write the future, if you will.
I love that. And it reminds me of the journey that I think many of us go through in our lives, of like turning the experiences we've had into something that is more meaningful. And love is that medicine that can quickly do that.
Yeah, and it fits perfectly with the idea of Unity's teaching of affirmative prayer, and that fits perfectly into quantum physics. Is that an almost probable certain future? However, through our words and our actions, we can actually manifest, and that's really for me what manifestation is we manifest a future that we are excited about. There's this great scripture from the Gospel of Thomas, which was a sayings gospel. So there's no teachings in it. There's just sayings. And the idea is that when the two become one, and I've always taken that to mean that when the two, being my thoughts and my feelings, become one, then I can move any mountain. Those mountains being the struggles that I might be experiencing in my own life and my own thoughts and what's showing up in front of me. So by bringing, our energy into our presence, and then having the thoughts that align with that and putting those things together, and then you bring that harmonization of love, of being of service, of generating something positive in the world. And that's where you become, in my mind, unstoppable. That's where you become the person that does their life in their best way.
And so much of that comes back to what we're able to bring into the present moment. And that reminds me, yesterday I was on a walk in the forest, and I was very much in my mental energy and having a conversation with my guides. And my guides just said, hey, like, slow down, stop. And it was hard for me to do. I was on a walk. I was having these experiences and trying to make sense of things. And eventually I stopped and I connected with the trees, and I started to connect with a presence that I wasn't connected with while I was moving. And all of a sudden this quiet clarity came. And myself, I would root that into the idea of love as well, that slowing down and connecting within, which is one of the things that you also wrote in your bio, that when we source from within, we can influence so many different outcomes.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I know what you mean. I've had those moments on those walks in the forest where the na 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 is going on. And it's like, wait a second, dude. Like, look around. You're in this beautiful spot with all this life force around you. Just chill out and breathe it in. But yeah, I would say that having been somebody who's suffered in my life at various times, as I'm sure you have, and anybody listening to this can attest to, you have suffering. I've gotten to the place in my life where it's my life. And so if it shows up in my life, I'm responsible.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I approach life. And so whatever is showing up in my life, in my mind, has come from something within me. I've attracted that energy into my life to either see it so I can course correct or to, bring some suffering onto me because I haven't been listening to those nudges that show up that say, hey, maybe go this direction. And then you ignore it. And it's like, well, knock, 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 knock. Hey, dude, go this direction. And you ignore it. And then, a rock falls on your head and says, hey, go this direction. And then maybe finally you get the message that there's something here for you to do.
That's so true. On my journey, I think that idea of lessons are repeated until learned. And there's sort of an amplification as you keep going through the experience, like you just described. And everything is a reflection. Like I really believe we live in this hall of mirrors. And so when we're having the same kind of personality show up and challenge us, stopping and saying, wait a second, why am I continuing to have to face this kind of personality and work through it and be triggered by it? And once you start to accept that, oh, there might be something for me to look at, things start to change. And that's the beautiful thing. It's like we can be powerful in shifting our perspective and the outcomes by taking responsibility, like you said.
Yeah, to me, it's the super magic, super sauce that
Mm-hmm.
we can have is that we take ownership for our part in everything that's going on. It doesn't mean you take ownership for other people's part. It also means you don't sit around looking to blame others. It
Mm-hmm.
means that you take an honest look and say, how did this show up in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And what is there for me to see so that I can move forward powerfully? And sometimes it feels great to wallow and sit in the muck. I've had many days where it's like, I'm not doing anything. But at some point, I always find, you know what? I want to live my life. I want to get going. I want to move forward. And what I've seen now in the past, which I wasn't aware of 20 years ago, is that it actually just requires me being responsible and
Mm-hmm.
taking on the responsibility for what is mine so that I can actually love myself and love myself through it. And, I have this saying that I've shared many times on my Insight Timer sessions is that I want to have so much love for myself that I just have to give it away. Like it's just spewing out of me. And on top of that, then I don't actually need to look for it from somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big one right there. Not having to look for it from somebody else, because it's a trap, and it's a trap that I've fallen into over the years. And this idea of loving self first is probably the biggest challenge that, if I'm honest, I'm still working on layers of it for sure. Like just the depth of what's available. And yeah, it's an interesting journey. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And I find that people like yourself doing something like this, the Sacred Village podcast, obviously my stepping into a Unity church in 2017 and hearing Reverend Patricia speak and just going, wow, this speaks to me. And like those little nudges and listening to them and then learning how you can take tools that are ways of being really that can strengthen your resolve and strengthen your self expression, strengthen your self confidence. And those are like magic for anybody for whatever you're going through. When you can draw on that from within, just like you can create your own hell. I often think that, what What the Bible was trying to teach us was that heaven is right here on earth. It's not somewhere else. It's right here, right now. I can have it. I can live in that peace and that place of love right here, right now. Or I can live in hell right here, right now. And I get to choose.
You just articulated something that I have believed since I was quite young. We lived right next door to a church, and I decided on my own to go and check it out. And I think I was young enough that I was going to the classes, and that was the first thing that confronted me, was this idea of heaven and hell. And I was like, something just doesn't feel right about the way this teaching is being presented. Ultimately created a distance between those teachings and myself. And I've always held that belief that you just articulated so well, that we have that choice.
Yeah. Well, life, for me, life is I'm what, 60 years old now. I finally have figured out a couple of things. There's many more to figure out, but I've just gotten to that place where my greatest power lies in my ability to choose and to stand with love in those choices. I just did a talk on Sunday down in Victoria called The Steadfast Heart. And it's about standing in your truth, and it's also about standing in the place of service of others.
Mm.
And when you combine those two things together, in my mind, you really start cooking with gas. Like not only are you strong and resolute in who you are as a person and able to take things and just not make it mean anything, and to allow yourself the space to take a breath and respond from a place of love, now you're actually operating in a place of power all the time. And it's not a power that is overriding others. It's a power that's actually conveying to people that I heard you. I understand what you're saying, and I'd like to partner with you, but I need to do it in this way.
Power is such an interesting word, and I know that it's been the theme of this month, and no surprise that it's been on my mind, and I've been working with that word. And I thought back to, I guess it was a reading I had maybe like 20 years ago, and I was told to step into my power. And what I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what that meant. I needed context. And I've come to know and come to be at this place where the most powerful way that we can show up, I believe, is to be ourself. And that's another kind of hurdle to work through, to be yourself. But what happens is there's this energetic truth that begins to emerge when we're in alignment with ourselves. It's like everything kind of shifts into place, and people can feel that resonance in how we're being because there's no distortion in the way that we're showing up. Would you agree?
Yeah, you made me think of something that I've aspired not so much to be, but to understand. And, I've had the great privilege of working in various roles throughout my life. And one of the areas that I worked in film and television in Vancouver for a number of years. And I worked with some pretty major movie stars, not movie stars in the sense of, well, they're a star, but they're owners of their craft.
Mm.
And I also worked with some people that were amazing cinematographers that understood what they did, and they carried themselves in such a way. And this is what I meant by saying that I've watched that from afar and understood, like, oh, there's a way of being that they walk into a room and it commands attention, not from a place of look at me. So they're not walking into the room, making a loud noise or making a fuss so that people pay attention. They walk into a room and they have an energy that says, I'm here. Not I'm here, look at me. I'm here. And it's interesting to see the difference, because I've seen the other side where somebody walks into a room and needs to cause a ruckus in order to get the attention, versus somebody that can just walk into a room and people just feel that energy.
I know that energy. I know exactly what you're talking about. And that really is well said. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it comes from a place of knowing yourself and being confident in what you do. And it's like, this is what I do. And as a minister, I've got to say, it's taken me, I've now been the spiritual leader at Unity Vancouver Island for just over a year. And it really took me that year to kind of understand the lay of the land, how to deal with congregations and all these different ideas and energies and influences and people with their wants and needs. And then to also understand my role as a spiritual leader and as, for lack of a better term, a visionary, because I am looked upon to have a vision for the ministry that is unfolded, right? To have like, this is how I've taken the work from the board of directors that is voted in by the congregation, and they present me with a contract that says this is the requirement for me to fulfill my duties as the minister. And in that is also leadership and managing Sunday services and managing the spiritual direction of the organization and the messaging. And so it's taken me a bit of a while to kind of land in this place of, oh, this is what I do, and here's how I'm going to do it now.
And to me, that sounds like there's some sort of claiming of the space.
Bingo.
And when you claim the space, what is it that becomes possible?
That's a great question. So for me, the claiming of the space is interesting because it's more of a claiming of the space within myself, letting go of the self-doubt, letting go of the timidness of, should I say this? Shouldn't I say this? I don't know. Like, there was a lot of deferral in the first few months of, what do I do? What don't I do? How do I act? How don't I act? And uncertainty. And so to answer your question, the claiming of the space is really within myself, of owning it to a place where I embody, what my meaning of minister is.
Yeah, I like that. I really do. On my own journey, I've been in positions of leadership for years, and it can be a lonely place because being of service to an organization or being of service to a congregation, it's like, if we're not solid in ourselves, then we can start to waver. We can start to be pushed in different directions. And to be anchored in ourselves is to be anchored in the congregation. So there's something at play there with both of those perspectives, and there's way more.
Yeah, you kind of hit on something that I remember. One of the strongest teachings or lessons I learned going through seminary was about triangulation. And this idea that I didn't really know what that, it's funny, when they explained it, it was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I had never thought of it. Like, I never looked at certain situations in my life where I was actually involved in triangulation. I would never have put that terminology on it, but I understand it. And this idea of playing people off of one another, or trying to always win by playing groups against one another, getting caught in these places where, well, they said this and then they said that, and then you're basically allowing rifts inside your organization, and in this case, a spiritual community, to grow and develop. And I believe if you're not strong and steadfast in your understanding of what it means to be a spiritual leader or what it means to be a minister, then you could easily fall into those traps because you want to be loved by everybody. And operating from that place, it's not your job to be loved by everybody. That's actually not in the 50 statements of truth that I agreed to as a minister. Did it say you need to be loved by everybody? It doesn't say that anywhere. So again, it kind of goes back to that. If I love myself enough and I am a stand for love, then I don't need to follow along on anything. I can actually make choices and say, no, I'm not doing that actually. Thank you for the invitation, but I'm not going to do that. Or no, we're not going to be doing that. Or yes, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. That's a great idea. It requires that kind of understanding about yourself and knowing what is the path here that we're going to walk, and then to stay to that knitting as much as possible. And it requires some strength at times, right? To not drift off of that.
Yeah, and that is so important. The idea of creating unity within the congregation is, I would imagine, a goal of what you're trying to achieve. But unity doesn't always have to look like everybody is in agreement either.
Yeah, that the definition of unity for me is that we all understand that we are of one source, of one presence, of one humanity. Like there is no separation. The separation is perceived. And I kind of think of it like some of the role is to lay out the groundwork so that anybody who is feeling separated, is feeling outside, is feeling in a place of unloved, or however you want to phrase it, that it's not true. It's really just perceived brokenness. You're already whole and complete. And so the work is to bring somebody back to that knowing, like that's already a given, and the perception has just drifted off of that path,
Hmm.
and everybody is whole and complete. There's nobody's needs fixing. Like one of my rules on my insight timer sessions is there's no fixing allowed. People can share what they need to share, and nobody comes in to rescue and fix. And if you do, I'm like, no, that's not, no, nobody's doing that here, because nobody's broken. There's just
Hmm.
perceived brokenness. And they may ask for a tool or something that might be helpful, and that's one thing. But to approach it as if they need fixing, that's offside to me. That's not unity at all. We're all wonderful, and we all have struggles.
And I feel like what you're pointing to is to come full circle back to that opening with the quantum soup and the way that we connect with that quantum soup and influence that quantum soup.
Yeah, it's exactly that understanding that, yeah, it kind of gets back to that probable almost certain outcome. So if nothing changes here, if I make no shifts, if I don't think differently, if I don't act differently, if I don't change things up, then the probable almost certain future will look this way. And wait a second, I can actually change that.
Right. And that reminds me of, we've used the word responsibility a few times, and you may have heard this before, which is, if you break down responsibility and flip it, it's response ability, which is your ability to respond, which is exactly what's required when you come up against an awareness of something's not going to change. So how am I going to respond to that?
Yeah, it's like I'll drop the Unity 5 principles here, and I have a very shortened version of the Unity 5 principles. So it's principle 1 is understanding that God is. So
Mm,
whatever that word means to you, whatever word you want to use in its place, the presence, life itself, life force, the quantum field, whatever that is, it exists. It's there. Step 2, or principle number 2, is I am. I am in the likeness of that. I am also that. I too am that thing, right? It's in me. Step 3 is my thoughts create my reality. So I think. So we've got God is, I am, I think. Number 4 is I affirm. So the act of affirmative prayer, affirming my outcomes, affirming what it is that is truly right for me, right? The truth of what is inside me. I affirm that. And then the 5th principle is I act, right? You've got to step into the action of doing in order for that manifestation to occur. there has to be the action that goes with it. So in Unity, we say, live the truth you know. So you affirm that truth and then you live the truth that you know.
Thank you for sharing that. It really does solidify everything we've been talking about in a very concrete way.
Yeah, so I usually rifle it off to somebody as God is, I am, I think, I affirm, I act.
Yeah. And the first one is interesting. It reminds me of my time working in addiction treatment centers. And the AA principles talk a lot about addiction being a spiritual problem. And the first step is to connect and hand this addiction over to a higher power. And there's so much resistance to that. I remember having one or two people come to the center, and we weren't really fully aligned completely with AA as being like the core of our program. And yet people would see the book on the table and they'd be like, I'm out. And there's so much resistance to spirituality. And I came across this term, which was an acronym, and it was GUS, GUS. It stood for God, Universe, Source. And it was just a way to kind of bridge that gap, the resistance towards spirituality and then openness to spirituality. And
Yeah.
usually it created enough of a laugh that someone was able to identify it, which was the first step, like understanding God is what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And finding a way to do that in a way that feels aligned.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And if you go back to the book, The Four Agreements, the dream of the planet that is mentioned in the Four Agreements, and that's so the word God has such such a story behind it that if somebody can't reframe that word for themselves, and they have a problem with it, they're going to struggle with it. Can I share a quick story?
Please.
So I'm very early on in my ministerial classes, and I had no idea, what am I doing here? This is like, how did this happen to me? This is not what I planned in my life at all. And so one of my first classes was a spiritual, I forget the title of it, but it was understanding my place in spirituality and my own thoughts around it. And so I had to do this questionnaire that took probably about 90 minutes to do, and then a one-on-one call with the instructor from the class to review all of my answers. And when it was asking me questions about what religion were you brought up in, and I was raised going to a Catholic church, I went to Sunday school, I was an altar boy for a period of time. And then I ran away from that at 18. I was like, I don't want anything to do with this. And I never went back to any spiritual organization, church or otherwise, till I found Unity in 2017 when I was in my mid 50s. Anyhow, I put down there that I don't want anything to do with this word God, the Bible, all of these things that triggered me. So all of these things were a problem, right? Then I'm having the meeting with the instructor and we're reviewing that. And she says to me, well, isn't it interesting? I'm totally into the teachings of Unity at this point, right? I'm full sunk in. I love it. And she goes, well, isn't it interesting that you're actually choosing to be a minister in an organization that actually uses the Bible metaphysically and sees Jesus as a way shower, as the example to live by, not the exception, right? There's a difference. We don't see him as the exception. We see him as the example. So we too could achieve that level of consciousness that Jesus obtained, right? And I just started laughing at how crazy it was that whole time I'm answering this questionnaire, I'm against anything that even resembled my old religious upbringing. And yet I was applying to be a minister in an organization that actually used the Bible and spoke about Jesus. And I realized in that moment that all I've done is just reframed the word God and what all of that stuff meant to me in a different perception. I've just rewritten for myself how I view it. And now I can actually work with it.
It makes me think there's always this sense of humor that I have connected to spirituality, of like how these things unfold and how we end up where we end up. There is something quite humorous about how these things come to be. And it reminds me how to not take things so seriously, because there's always this path that we're being guided along. And I love that you found yourself in that situation in that moment and having that clarity, because I think we all have those moments if we're open to them.
Yeah, and the laugh is right, because that's exactly what I did. I just laughed at how hilarious this is, that I went into this with like, I am never going to do anything that resembles that religious upbringing. And as a matter of fact, I was actually diving deeper into it from a completely different set of principles and truths, but still using it. And when I give my talks on Sundays, I'm quite likely to bring in a Bible scripture and metaphysically interpret it. Like the Thomas one I gave, then when the two become one, you can move any mountain. And it has nothing to do with moving an actual mountain. The mountain is metaphysically the challenges that we face, right? But you could take the Bible literally, or you could take it metaphysically. The very simple metaphysical approach for any wisdom teachings, anything, is, how does this show up in me?
Hmm.
You read something and you ask that question, how does this show up in me? And you're well on your way to interpreting things in a much different light, where it becomes a tool and a teaching for yourself to aspire to that best life you could live.
I love that. So let's shift the conversation for the last few minutes. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about how music has influenced you in your life. And I know a few minutes isn't really going to give that justice, but I do want to give voice to that, because it is a big part of who you are and how I experience you. And so what would you want to say about your relationship to music?
Oh, wow. This will be hard to do in 2 minutes or less.
I know.
So music, I still have an internal disagreement with music in me. And it comes from working on still letting go of how that went. When I was a young boy, grade 3 to be exact, I moved to the Vancouver area from Winnipeg and moved right next door to a guy who was in my grade 3 class that had a drum set. And I remember he brought me to his house, and I walked down the steps, and there was this beautiful 4-piece Rogers sort of fisheye drum kit sitting there. It was kind of turquoisey green with blue. And my mouth just hit the floor. I had never seen a drum set live in person. He played, and he let me play it for like 30 seconds, and then he kicked me off of it. And that was it. I was hooked on wanting to be a drummer. And I used to go to drums only every weekend that I possibly could. I'd ride the bus from Tawasin out to East Van, which back then took, the better part of 2 hours by bus to get there. And then just walk around drums only, and they'd let me hit drum kits, right? Not for hours, but, I could get a good few whacks in. And then in grade 4, another guy moved to Tawasin, and in grade 5, he got a drum set, and he was my friend. I would get to once in a while sneak in on his drum kit and play it. And then finally in grade 7, my parents, Christmas morning, there was a drum set under the tree. My first question was, this is so funny. My first question was, when I saw it, was, what is it? And then my second question was, who is it for? Of course, everybody was standing around with their cameras as I entered the room, right? But still, I was like dumbfounded. And then I just played. I played to records constantly. Never took lessons. Don't know how to read music. I still don't know how to read music today. And I just played and played and played, and eventually became a huge Rush fan that I still am today. And Neil Peart is my drumming hero guru, but I have many drumming gurus. And so my conflict still with music is that at some point, and this is a great lesson for my life, is at some point we did 2 albums. I was in a band back in the 90s where we recorded 2 albums. We had some songs on some TV show. We did some tours across Canada, and we were gaining some success. And at some point, the shift went from playing music to, how do we get a record deal? And the lesson was like, it's going back to the beginning here, where if you're looking for love from somebody else, you're never going to find it. Right. So that's what I equate that to, is we were looking for some record label to give us the blessing that we were good. And so we were doing whatever we could, including even rethinking how we should play music for what might attract a record label when they have no clue. They don't know. We would know better. We're making the music. Why don't we just make the music that we want to make? And I lost sight of that. I became jaded and cynical about the music industry and lost that passion for playing and creating music. And fortunately, in the last 7 years or so of being at Unity, I hadn't played my drums in 20 years until I started back at Unity, and Joshua Holloway had a show to do and invited me to play drums like 3 days before the show of jazz standards, of which I don't know how to play jazz and I don't read music. And my mouth just said yes while I was thinking no time. And I played with them and it went fine. And then I just started playing again. And so now I'm in a swing band. I'm having a blast learning how to play swing. And I've got a gig coming up with a group of guys, which is a 60s, 70s, and 80s rock night of 3 really awesome professional musicians. And I get to tag along because it's our venue and I get to say that I get to play drums. I'm finding my way back to that passionate love for music, but I'm still very critical of my playing and of what I don't know and that I can't read music. And so I have this internal dialogue and battle of my relationship with my playing of music versus my listening to music. If that makes any sense. You could say it this way. I am on a healing journey and a healing road with my relationship to my approach of playing music again.
I love that. And I'm going to just leave that story to stand on its own and have people glean from it what they will, because it does feel like a full closure of what we've been talking about.
Yeah, thank you.
I always like to ask my guests at the very end, how would you suggest that someone could connect with the sacred today?
Oof. Well, I see that as a 2-part question, because in my Unity teachings is you already are. So you're never not connected to the sacred. And what there might be missing is the understanding that you are connected to the sacred. And maybe you need a tool to do that, or maybe you need an understanding. And I know for me, what allowed me to find my way back was I read A Course in Miracles. I don't believe that that's what somebody should do. It's a pretty hard read. But I would say finding, well, podcasts like this, listening to other people, hearing that it's actually okay for you to start that journey of understanding that you're already connected. Spirituality is about life itself, the energy of life. Just go out into the forest and you can feel the energy of life. That to me is spirit. That to me is God. That to me is the universe. It's the sacred. It's in everything is this energy of life. And that's why I have such a love for life. I have such an affinity for life as I've connected that. I realize that is the sacred truth of God. It's not some God up in the sky judging me and all of that stuff. It is actually life itself. That source energy is it. And so it's a matter of really thinking about that and seeing it for yourself, to just understand that your life is sacred and it's yours.
I love it. Thank you for that. And for people who want to stay connected or explore more of your work, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, I would say that I'll do a plug for Unity Vancouver Island. You can find us on YouTube with Unity Vancouver Island. What we do is we do our Sunday services from Nanaimo live off the floor, but then by Monday or Tuesday, we cut down to just the talk and the meditation. So if you just go to our video stream there, you'll see, if you just want to hear the talks and the meditation, there's a whole selection of talks and meditations there. And then the other place to find me is on Insight Timer. And typically every Saturday morning around 7:30 a.m. our time, I do a live session on Insight Timer. And there's generally 100 or so people from around the globe that join me. And yeah, we just have an awesome time sharing on that stream. And there's beautiful people there that have been joining me there for the last 5 years on a on a regular basis. And it's become a real sacred space for me to just practice what I'm doing. It's like a practice zone for me. I get to go there and practice being me in my best self I can.
I'm so grateful that we were able to have this conversation together, and so grateful that I get to continue this conversation with you offline. And I appreciate the gifts that you shared as we connected together.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. I'll tell you secretly, my goal was to get to an hour.
That's funny.
Because you told me that it's like usually 30 to 40 minutes. And I was like, well, let's see if we can push this to an hour today.
We could have if I continued asking questions, because there was
true.
tons in the end, let me tell you.
It's true.
That's
But
awesome.
hey, thank you so much. I feel blessed to have been included here. And if anybody ever wants to reach out to me personally, just find me on social media and you can send me a message or anything like that. I'll do my best to reply. And yeah, so thanks a lot for having me.
You're very welcome. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, take good care. Thank you for joining us here on Sacred Sundays. I hope something in today's offering spoke to your spirit, stirred something true, or simply gave you a moment to breathe. You can find more Sacred Sundays episodes, as well as other conversations from the Sacred Village podcast at sacredvillagepodcast.com. Feel free to share this episode with someone who might need it. Until next time, may your Sunday be slow and sacred. Bye for now.